This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast brought to you by Hoxo Media. And I'm really excited to introduce to our audience somebody who often sits in this seat, actually. He's also a host of his own podcast. This is Martin Smith, who is the MD of Talent Drive, and his podcast is called Talent Talks. Welcome to you today, Martin. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Hi, Lysha. Thanks for having me on today. Very well.
You're very welcome. And for those who are actually choosing to watch us over on YouTube, I think Martin has definitely upped the stakes in terms of microphones.
I'm going to lie to everyone now and tell you this is my next room just off the lounge, but that'd be a lie. No, this is the studio I record in.
It's great. It sounds great and it looks great too. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And for those who aren't yet familiar with you, give us an overview of what Talent Drive is and also a bit about your podcast.
Yeah, sure. So Talent Drive are a specialist in procurement supply chain across the UK. So we recruit anything from kind of a buyer level, entry level procurement role, all the way up to sort of a procurement director, senior leadership type positions across the UK and across all industries, both perm and interim. And my background's been procurement supply chain for 12 years, both agency and I did a bit of time in-house as well, which we may talk about later, perhaps. In terms of the podcast, so Talent Talks was set up about 18 months ago. There was no other recruiter in the procurement space that were doing podcasts, so saw it as a real good opportunity and a good opening in the market. Procurement people are historically very bad about talking about themselves, so it was great to sort of get people on to talk about their careers and what they're doing, and obviously the last 12 months people have had more time to be able to invest in that. So yeah, just like yourself, having good guests on to sort of talk about their careers and backgrounds and experiences and sharing best practice to our, like your audience being recruiters, our audience is the sort of procurement community.
Definitely. And I think that's where we've got a really sort of synergy with why we're doing what we're doing. It's sharing that best practice. And I know that we will come on to that a little bit later on in terms of what we can learn from people in your sector. And just as a sort of, as we record this now, we're heading to the end of March 2021, and hopefully there is an end in sight to lockdown 3. So hopefully by the time this goes live, we'll have a little bit more. But how has COVID been for your sector?
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough, like with all sectors. We were fortunate that we've managed to still be trading. We've not been, obviously, in things like hospitality and aviation, other sectors, which have obviously been absolute decimators. I know some of your guests have been on to talk about. Procurement have still been going. I think there's definitely been cuts, and I think it's been more pausing rather than stopping or culling back staff headcount, as it were, generally. So a lot of the procurement profession in certain industries were on furlough, or like I say, projects were paused and headcount kind of growth was paused as well. We started seeing a bit of an upturn again, sort of July, August time, but only in certain sectors. And it's only really sort of picked up, I'd say, in the last sort of 3 to 4 months. But like everyone, it was incredibly tough. And as a relatively startup business for me, it was under a year in when the pandemic hit. So it was a bit of a scary time. But I think we're sort of slowly coming out the other side now, thankfully. But yeah.
Well, you've survived, so hopefully now it's time to thrive. That's what I say to anybody, that whether you're a year old or whether you're 20 years old in recruitment, I think it's a very good time. So a topic that we're going to talk about today, something that's very poignant to me, which is that it's about meaningful relationships. And, it's something that we talk about now because I think traditionally recruitment has been seen quite as a sort of transactional, we just fulfill a brief. So just put some thought around that. Why did you want to talk about that today? Why is that important to you as a topic?
So I think, I think meaningful relationships, I think the last 12 months has really put a point on that. And actually, to your point around the transactional versus sort of the more engaging and strategic way of doing recruitment, businesses have had their hand forced. They've had to build more meaningful relationships. The topic of recruitment and have you got any jobs in a very transactional way hasn't been very apt because not many people have been recruiting. So I think it's change the landscape and the lens a little bit on how people recruit. And, for me, it's very much around the sustainability of any industry and any recruitment business is about building those meaningful relationships. But I think what it means to me is it's something that has personal significance, and it's around sort of the caring, and it's around being sort of trying to build long lasting relationships, not just talking about, have you got any jobs or are you looking for a new role? Yes, that's the premise of what recruiters do. But I think that the last 12 months, we've all blurred our lines between work and personal. We've had to, or working from home. There's been no opportunities to go in an office environment and differentiate the two. And I think the recruiters that I've seen that have been able to thrive and sustain both mentally and professionally are those that have been able to have the conversation and change the lens, and talk just a bit about how are you doing, just a bit of that, how are you, because we're all suffering. We've all been in this, awful pandemic for over 12 months. As you say, I share your sentiment, as everyone does. Hope we're getting out of it soon. But I think for us, it's around, talking and changing the lens on how to build those relationships with people in a more sustainable way. And I think businesses are still deferring back to kind of just transacting. And I think some are still doing that. And that's fine to a degree. But like you, it's around being, we'll talk about authenticity later, but it's about building something a bit more meaningful and actually that means something to you rather than just plastering on your LinkedIn, we've got this job over here. It's actually you want to having a conversation with people on a more personal level.
Yeah, true. And I think, and actually the word partnership springs to mind, because if you think about what partnership means, it means that both people involved in that partnership need to give as much and then be in a position to maybe not take, but reciprocate to each other. And I think that I'm so pleased you used that expression, because I use that blurry lines expression all the time. And I think that's one of the big positives out of COVID, in that we've all seen the human side. Who hasn't been on a Zoom call where the child's walked in, the dog's barfed everywhere, the doorbell's gone because Amazon's here again. And, we've all seen a side to each other that really, why shouldn't we have known that about each other? And actually, as we go back into whatever the new normal, well, we're in the new normal, but, as people go back into more of an office environment, whether it's blended or full time, I hope we don't lose that. Because the reality is, if you think about the relationships that you've built over the last year, you don't want to reverse that. You don't want to not have that conversation with your decision maker and how are you doing? And I think all too often people aren't interested to ask that question because maybe they've not had that mentality to say, how are you actually doing?
Yeah. I think we all work at pace. It's so true. And we all, as recruiters, we all work at such pace. And when the market is buoyant, pre-pandemic, we're all just running around, getting CVs over to clients. And sometimes you lose that and forget about that value add. And as you say, asking a bit more about the personal questions and getting on a more deeper level with individuals. And I think, I hope as we come out of this, that those recruiters that have truly invested in their people, and that's what it's about, and been honest with their people and been consistent with their messaging, I really hope that those people will see the fruits of their labor, as it were, the last 12 months. And I think, 99.9% of those candidates and clients out there will remember that. They'll remember the recruiter that picked up the phone because they'd lost their job or they're on furlough or they weren't sure about, their security in their role, like we've all been. I've not been sure about the viability of our business, and I'm sure it's been the same with yourself. So we've all gone through that at different levels. So I hope, and I think people will remember that, and I think the recruiters coming off the back of that will thrive.
And actually, if you think about some recruiters who are in very high volume environments where it's maybe more portal based, they might be listening to this thinking, what on earth are you talking about? Who are they going to ask these questions to? But that's where you probably have to ask yourself that over a period of time, artificial intelligence will probably replace your job. Ultimately, that's where I think that COVID has transformed recruitment in a year to what was inevitably probably going to happen in your skill set. So I think we are very much talking to those people who are influencers, who are consultants in the truest sense of the word. That having a meaningful relationship does mean actually understanding your customers' why. And how often do you actually ask, I've actually just before we started recording this, I've just been speaking to somebody that I've known for years, and we've spent an hour talking about what his why will be when he presses the button on a really senior role into his board. He hasn't pressed it yet, but I've spent an hour of my time doing that, because ultimately when he's ready to, I know exactly why he's doing it, because then I'll know who to plug in of the who. So we really should take more time to do that. And you'd agree with that,
and totally agree with that. And I think I don't think just recruiting, as it were, just transacting is going to be the long-term future of the recruitment industry. So you've got to find your differentiator, whether that's through doing a podcast, whether that's doing webinars, whether that's doing any kind of thought leadership. that's the thing that I think will sort of take people, I guess, apart from their competition. The procurement market in the UK, hopefully some of your listeners are working in it. It's quite a saturated market. There's quite a lot of recruiters that proclaim to be in procurement, whether they're doing finance and that links in, or just sole specialists like I am. But I think, it is literally sort of quite black and white in terms of those that are clearly building their brand and doing these thought leadership things, and those that, as we're coming out of lockdown now, are just going, got another job, and they've just reverted back to type A and what they've always been used to. I think that's such a shame. I think that's a really missed opportunity. And some clients will just go, yeah, that's fine. We just want to transact. And don't get me wrong, there's many multi-million-pound businesses out there that just do that, and their clients just want that. But I hope as an industry, we have evolved a bit, and the last 12 months has allowed us to realign and focus again back on that relationship side.
And actually, everything that you've said there resonates 100% in what I do. Obviously, I recruit for the recruitment industry. And if you said to me in March 2020, you will literally be inundated with clients hiring pre-COVID levels. I mean, largely down to content, but of course, key recruitment, we've been doing it a very long time. And I always say we're the barometer. If a rec to rec's busy with vacancies, that's good for everybody, because if recruitment companies are hiring, that means they feel invested in their sector, and so on and so on. But being a discerning recruitment professional yourself in your market, and if you're listening, you're doing HR or technology, wherever you are listening to this, you have to ask yourself, what does that relationship mean to you? Because I know that if I've got a client, I'll manage expectations, which is part of our consultant hat. We will manage your expectations. What does that talent pool look like? How realistic is it? We can help you fulfill whatever it is. Listen to us. We are here to advise you. And if I've got a client just going, just send me CVs, I'm like, that's the reverse actually of what we're talking about. I just get put off by that. So if you're listening to this and that's your tactics, have you got any jobs? I've got some CVs. What value are you really adding? To your absolutely. Customer base? It's not totally agree. Not appealing at all. So authenticity is something that I think connects. And I have to say, a lot of what you're saying, you're really resonating with what I talk about. So amongst your community, you said at the very start that your sector tends to be a little bit more. Maybe I don't think you used the word guarded, but I get the feeling that a bit more traditional. So how does authenticity break down those barriers?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think firstly, recruitment on a broader level is an emotional process, So the last 12 months, in the fragility that I think we've seen in candidates has meant authenticity should be even more important as it was before. Being authentic is one of the values that Talent Drive have. It's one of our 5 core values, and it's something I really thrive and believe in. But I think it's about whether you're doing procurement, whether you're doing IT, whatever it may be, I think that will still resonate. Being honest, it's about being transparent. And I think also from a recruiter perspective, it's about owning who you are and what you do. So, some people will be on this that run recruitment business very successfully. It's a lifestyle business. It works around their personal life and family. That's great. Yeah. I think there's a negative connotation around, do you not want to scale it and have investors in it? Some people, that's what they want to do. And others want to have that lifestyle business. Now, I'm probably somewhere in the middle of that, because it works with my lifestyle, but also, I'm planning on scaling it and growing it at some level. But I think some people are so wedded to the idea of just trying to scale something up. The authenticity behind what they do and how they do it, I think, is lost. And actually just own who you are, own your sector, own the market that you know and love. If you can't fill a role, tell your clients that. I think the power of no, as we hear in the industry, just be honest with them. And I always remember there was a client of mine, before we mentioned their name, but when I first set out, I was just saying yes to everything and yes to everyone, and just trying to get the jobs in, and it was all exciting and kind of in that startup mode. And actually, they weren't an appropriate client for me at all. The payment terms were rubbish. There was no engagement with line. You were just talking to an HR. Just all the classic wrong things to sort of to be what is a good client. And for me, I really took the learns, and I turned around to them and said, no, it's not working. And this was last year. And it was a weird thing to say no and walk away, but my God, I'm glad I did it. And it really sort of felt like a weight was lifted. The client respected me, and you just sort of move on. So, being authentic, being real, being genuine, being honest gives you a real clear vision, and gives people that are looking at you a real clear vision on on who you are and what you do. And it helps clarity in your own mind when you're looking to grow it, or, as I say, just be yourself or your business partner or whatever that may be. But I think recruiters often shy away from that, and they shy away behind whether it's their social media or their website, just to sort of proclaim they're some big global corporate. What that doesn't mean that's good. The numbers of headcount in your recruiter team doesn't mean, if you've got a team of 20, that doesn't make you more successful than a team of 2. So, I think that would be my biggest sort of mantra around the authenticity in the recruitment industry.
Yeah, being transparent goes a very long way. And I totally agree with everything that you said there. And I know that'll be why you're attracting some sensational thought leaders to your podcast. So how did that came about, you say, about 2019, was it?
Yeah, back into 2019. So we kind of got the concept of the business off the ground and got sort of 6 months of trade. And then I think for me, as I said, procurement podcasts, that they didn't really exist in the UK. So I saw there was a real sort of market there to go into. It allowed the individuals to put a spotlight on themselves and their own career from a personal point of view, and I guess from a candidate perspective. And then from a client point of view, they were very much looking at, what they've achieved in the last sort of 12, 18 months or whatever that may be in their current firm. And we talk around various different things. You've touched on the AI and automation and robotics and stuff, which is prevalent to all industries, and procurement as well, in terms of how they do things. So, and it just snowballed from there, really, Lysha. Like you, when you have, I was listening to some of your podcasts before, and it's like, oh, you got some great guests on, and it's the same principle in our market. You get good guests on, and they go, oh, I want to be a part of that, and then it's sort of snowballed from there. So I love it. It's not something that makes me money, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm not doing that at all, and I know you're not either. I do it because I enjoy it. And
benefit is that you're creating so much value for your sector, and it's just so much fun to talk to people. Yeah. And learn,
and being positive and learning from different people. Learning, honestly, the last 12 months, I've learned more about the industry than I have in the first sort of 10, 11 years I worked in it. Just from massively. Just from talking to people, understanding.
Hold that thought, guys. If you're listening to this and you haven't yet thought about doing a podcast,
do it. Yeah.
Thinking about it, because that's true value in it. There's no question. So I'm sorry, but whilst we're recording this, my dog has just decided to do what we said before. He's
love it. Great.
So there you go. That proves it's a lot. Well, we're recording this live, obviously. So I know that if I was to look back over, well, we're not even quite 12 months as we record this of the Recruiters Recruitment podcast, but I would say that there's one word that defines everything that I've learned from whoever has been on, and it's all leaders across the industry, and that's the word communication. That's like the drive, the golden thread through all of this. Is there a golden word for you that's come through from Talent Talks?
I think about. Yeah, good question. I'd probably say visibility is probably the word. And from their point of view, being visible, 99.9% of the guests I've had on, I've never obviously been on a podcast or never really, other than the traditional route of guest speaking in rooms and stuff when we were able to do that. They've never been on a podcast. They've never talked to people in their community. And it was amazing. We had a panel on a few months ago that were in the procurement sort of consultancy industry, all working for like individual competitors. And I sat them on the podcast, all 4 of them together. They'd never met each other. They'd never spoken. You just like, and I think since then they've had some sort of bounced a few ideas and shared some best practice. That's what it's about. Yes, the long-term piece around hopefully elevating the Talent Drive brand. But for me, it's just about bringing out positivity in the procurement industry. I feel like a guest member of procurement now as an industry. I know I'm the recruiter in it, but I feel quite proud about what the industry is. But it's still got a long way to go. The brand imagery in what we do in certain organizations still isn't great. And again, I think that's one of the biggest sort of sells of getting people onto the podcast. It's to sell more the procurement industry for those that don't know about it.
To educate people. Well, I'm sure that anyone that's involved in that sector, I think they'll probably hold you in very high esteem, that you're trying to create positive change, and it starts somewhere. That's what I always say. It has to start somewhere. So before we finish, you must have spoken to and listened to and been at the receiving end of lots of educational aspects of what your leaders in your community are doing best. So what can recruiters learn from the procurement sector that we should be doing?
I think I think the main thing is be quite sort of clear on what you want, and what I mean by that is procurement people. When I get briefed on something, we're quite, this is what we're looking for. There's no real sort of flexibility to a degree in terms of what they want, and I think that's probably a good thing in a way. It allows you to know what good looks like for that individual client, and I think that's the biggest thing with procurement people. They don't compromise on what the talent they'll get into the business, whether that's potential or the right technical experience. Of course, that varies from client to client, but generally, knowing what good looks like, they have a real clear message of that, and I don't think they compromise. Which I think, as a recruiter, although that makes it harder, actually the hardest thing probably is the fact you're dealing with skilled, trained negotiators. So,
but you are in recruitment as well.
Oh yeah, I guess that's it, right? Well, so but yeah, I guess the point is you're negotiating with another negotiator. You know what I mean? In that sort of sales environment, so they're used to negotiating terms every day. That's what they do as their job. So that's the biggest challenge for us. But I think for them, they're quite clear with that. But it's good fun, and it's 12 years in, and we're still going strong.
And I always maintain that a good recruiter should be. It's a bit of a negative word to say, but we should be a barrier almost. But we should help create that benchmark and what good does look like. Yeah. And not be afraid to be a little bit rigid with it. And I'm not talking about behaviours or, somebody's got all the right behaviours and traits. But I do think there's a lesson to be learned there for a lot of recruiters, especially those that are working in, like you say, where you're dealing with a type of person that's a negotiator naturally.
Yeah.
I think that's a very big lesson. It's been an absolute joy, as I knew it would be. And we'll make sure that when we share this, we'll make sure your podcast connections are on there so people can go and listen to Talent Talks and listen to
great
thought leaders across your community, and keep doing what you're doing, because it's clearly creating a wonderful community. And thank you for joining us today on the Recruitment.
Yeah, thanks, Lysha. Thanks for having me, and keep doing what you're doing as well. Love it.
Thank you. That was very kind. Thank you.